Hey, how's it going, guys? Ancient Rune here, back with another Borderlands 4 video, and today I will be going over the best Amon builds in Borderlands 4 that will absolutely destroy the upcoming raid boss. This raid boss is primarily flesh, so these builds will be focused on maximizing damage for that health bar. We have also seen that there will most likely be vile crystal stuff, so we also take that into account with these builds. I will not be fully explaining the builds, but I will mention key parts of them. For the actual full builds, I will link videos and write-ups in the description for you to fully understand the build types if you need extra info. This video is just to kind of like promote these builds and bring it to people's attention. I also do not take credit for all the builds that I will mention, as not all of them are mine. This video is also not a ranking of power from weakest to strongest, but just a list of the strongest builds for this boss. I also want to point out that there is still time for Gearbox to implement buffs, nerfs, and changes that could affect the power of these builds, but after over 300 hours of pure Amon theory crafting in game, and even more just researching and talking to others, I do not see these builds changing on being important. If anything big comes up, I will put it in the comments and pin it so you can see it easily. But before we get started, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Borderlands 4 content and the soon to come UVH6 builds. I also want to shout out the Soup Kitchen Discord, which is the main theory crafting hub for Borderlands 4, where all the top Borderlands nerds talk. All these builds mentioned would not be possible without the people in that Discord. If you want to learn more about Borderlands 4, then make sure to join the Discord, as everyone there is more than happy to help. Now let's stop the yapping and get into these juicy builds. First off, we have Gun Amon, which is pretty broad, so this is going to probably be the longest explanation, but it's basically using high damage guns to melt bosses. Whether it be with strong underbarrel guns like Spread Launcher with high caliber Pierce, or the Oscar Bike Space Laser, or any type of super strong underbarrels, because we all know how strong they are, or teeter chucks like the Inscriber pistol or the Murmur AR. And with the underbarrels, we know this boss is most likely going to have multiple phases, so then what will you do when your underbarrel's on cooldown? Well, you just swap to another underbarrel gun. You have 4 gun slots after all. And then with Teeter, you should have more than plenty ammo, especially with pistol ammo, to kill the boss, and definitely vile crystals. With this build, you will see skills like Dragon's Breath for the amp and fire conversion, Berserk and There Is Only Red for huge cryo bonus element to boost your damage. Then you also have Force of Nature for the double dipping explosion based on your last 10 strongest hits, which is going to be huge for a high health enemy like Bloomreaper. When your shots are dealing hundreds of thousands to possibly millions of damage per hit, then your explosions will easily be dealing millions and millions of damage as well. Then if you need to boost your damage even more, you can pair it with Force of Nature Explosion with a Furnace class mod with points into Raging Inferno. Raging Inferno is also a double dip and can proc off of Force of Nature crits, which makes this a triple dip which can hit billions of damage. Then you can also pair it with Electrical Fire to have hundreds of millions of damage and a shock dot on the side as well. Builds that use these will be Amon, which is a general do-it-all gun build, Throwing Hands, which is a TDR focused build, and Hotshot, which is focused more on those one-shots while also being practical. You can also find Girthquake's Slip and Dip build, which is his take on the do-it-all gun build. Next up, we have Grenade Amon. Grenades are underused, but very strong and similar to other Ordnance builds, taking the double dipping status effect skills Tail the Comet and Blackout. We use high damage grenade ordnances that hit a lot, like the Jelly and Blockbuster. Then you also have the Slippy and Firepot, which usually take a slightly different skill tree spec for their niches, like Slippy dealing melee damage and Firepot dealing gun damage. We then have Electrical Fire, which turns our Blackout dots into a 50% fire dot. We keep up this grenade spam with Crucible's multiple charges and Tripwire specialization. Builds that you can see this in use is Game On, which is a do-it-all grenade build, Potluck, which is focused on Firepot, and Amok, which has a Slippy focused spec. Now we have another gun build, but slightly different because we have gun status effects. Using a Shock Stellium with the Energy Disc Underbarrel, you can apply huge dots all the time with the use of the Prime Potency Enhancement. Now this boss is going to be a flesh bar, so why are we using a shotgun? Well, when we use electrical fire to add a 50% power fire dot based on our shock dot, it actually ends up being higher DPS than using a fire gun and adding a 50% shock dot based on that fire dot. The fire dots on your shock will be slightly weaker when converted, but the much higher shock dot will make up for that. On top of all that, you will also have the Onslaughter and Bolt Action bonus elements being able to apply strong dots as well for even more damage. Now, a potential problem that this build could face is going to be Vile Crystals. These cannot be dotted, and we have seen purple health bar on this boss. Now, the energy disc is absolutely nasty with Vile Crystals on regular enemies, but we can expect a raid boss Vile Crystals to have much higher health. If energy discs on their own cannot break these crystals, then we may be looking at boosting the bullets damage a bit instead of dot damage, or using a different gun specifically for the crystals. But nonetheless, when that dot hits the actual health bar, you will see Bloomreaper be absolutely deleted. The best build that shows this off will be Girthquake's Dot Shot, which is purely focused on this combination. I will also mention my Amon build again, as it can do dot stuff, but it's not nearly as strong as Dot Shot will be with this build type. Next up, we will go over Amon's strongest action skill, Scourge, which is a top tier build to use. Benefiting from both action scale and ordnance damage makes this specifically good because you can benefit from up to 3 double dipping skills that apply status effects. You have Tail of the Comet for cryo damage, Blackout for shock damage, and most importantly for this raid boss, Raging Inferno for the fire damage. You will also most likely be using a Furnace class mod with points in Raging Inferno. On top of all those dots, you can use a Protean Cell Shield, which will give you a bonus element that applies to dots and can proc these dot skills just at a lower power, which is pretty crazy. Then you have the option of using either Eternal Winter or Stormlance for your augment. Eternal Winter is really good for your action skill, doing really good damage and lasting a long time. But Stormlance is really good for that quick, super high damage. Which one being better will depend on how long the boss takes and the damage needed. Now you can also go for a spec with electrical fire and not going for a Raging Inferno, which will apply a strong 50% fire dot because of Blackout and using a Blackout class mod, but because of the 2-second cooldown, I don't see it being better than just focusing on Raging Inferno. Builds that focus on Scourge for damage will be my Urge to Scourge Amon build, which goes for Raging Inferno, and Girthquake's Amon build, which goes with that electrical fire spec. Now for honorable mention, I would like to show off Amon's other action skills, Crucible and Onslaughter, because they do have potential. They aren't the strongest builds ever, but they are no means bad. Both Crucible and Onslaughter's damage rely on Raging Inferno, which as mentioned previously is a double dipping fire dot. This usually isn't as good because most enemies have strong shield and armor bars, but since we have purely flesh, there is some potential. We do also have some shock dots from electrical fire conversion to a 50% power shock dot and Protean Cell bonus element, which applies to all status effects and can create its own. With Crucible, you are looking at either Hour of the Hammer or Blade Tempest. Blade Tempest has the highest damage, but since it uses all your charges, it may not be best for a multi-phased boss fight. With Onslaughter, you are looking for Thermal Diffusion with a triple turtle order shield for the highest shield capacity in the game to add huge base damage to your punch, which will then go into Raging Inferno. This is easily the strongest bossing augment for punching. Now I kind of grouped these builds together because the skill trees and gear are so similar, but they both play differently. You can also keep an eye out on Molten Royal, which is an Onslaughter capstone, which double dips damage before even including Raging Inferno, which leads to a triple dip. There are a lot of problems and factors to whether or not Molten Royal will be good for this raid boss, but if it works, it's definitely something fun. Builds that use these skills are my Stormbringer Amon for Crucible, Fisticuffs Amon for Onslaughter, and Ham Slamwich for Molten Royal. I do hope these builds work out, but they are not as guaranteed as the main 5 builds being mentioned. Now for the last build, and I said this video isn't a ranking, but Heavy Ordnance is probably Amon's strongest build type, using specific heavy ordnances like the Malawan Hailspike or the Torque Honey Bunches to get tons of procs of the double dipping skills, Tail the Comet, and Blackout. You can then turn the Blackout dot into a 50% power fire dot with electrical fire, which will be amazing for Bloomreaper. Then you can get infinite ammo with a class mod with Primal Surge. Since electrical fire has a 2-second cooldown and you will have multiple blackout dots, it may not be worth going electrical fire as you only have one of those dots applying a fire dot. Instead, we could reach Primal Surge from skill tree and then just focus on boosting Tail the Comet damage as high as possible, since cryo damage is neutral against flesh. Where you can find both of these skill tree options will be my Amon build called Horba, which stands for Heavy Ordnance Ricochet Bonanza Amon. Those are the top 5 Amon builds for Bloomreaper. Remember to check out the links in the description for all of the videos and write-ups that fully explain the builds. If you end up using one of these builds, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Borderlands 4 content. Also, make sure to go subscribe to Girthquake, as he's a fellow Amon nerd, and some of those builds that I mentioned are his. He also did a lot of testing for Amon, so huge shout out to him for all that. If you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment and let me know what build you are going to end up using for Bloomreaper. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.